Assalamualaikum and good afternoon to Professor Kamal Hassan, distinguished guests. Today is a milestone day of sorts as we will be launching Risalah Al-Quran by Muhammad Asad. The first work by Muhammad Asad that will be translated into Bahasa Melayu. For that very reason, we appreciate your presence here with us today. Thank you very much for being here. IRF was launched in 2009 by Professor Tariq Ramadan, accompanied by Professor Kamal Hassan. As you're all aware, we are an Islamic organization dedicated to promoting a rational and just appreciation of Islam against the rising tides of conservatism and chauvinism that we witness every day. We promote dialogue rather than confrontation, reflection rather than prejudice, and compassion rather than exclusion. Muhammad Asad has been an especially important influence for us along our journey. His emphasis on independent reasoning and social justice in Islam has been significant in guiding IRF's own work and outreach. The depth of his wisdom cannot be fully grasped without considering his profoundly remarkable life. Born as a descendant of a long line of Jewish rabbis, Asad converted to Islam at 26 in Arabia, whereby he learned Arabic, living amongst the Bedouins. He then went on to rigorously study the Quran and Hadith in Medina for 6 years. He was also to become instrumental in designing the Islamic State of Pakistan after being personally acquainted with philosopher Muhammad Iqbal. Indeed, it was in South Asia that Asad completed the entire translation and commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari. Unfortunately, only one volume of the commentaries managed to be published. The rest were destroyed during the upheaval that ensued amidst the partition of India and Pakistan. Muhammad Asad, in fact, saw for himself the torn pages of his commentaries, his hard work of more than 10 years, strewn away all over River Ravi, the hundreds of pages of his manuscripts floating over the river's surface. However, he believed that all of his work was not in vain. He regarded his work on Sahih al-Bukhari as training and preparation for him to start on a more challenging task, which was to translate and explain the text of Al-Quran in English. He started this when he moved to Vienna in 1960. Then he relocated to Tangiers, and then to Lisbon, and then finally to Mijas in Spain. He intended to complete his work in 2 years, but it took him 17 years instead. What we are launching today is one part of that remarkable effort in making the Al-Quran comprehensible to non-Arabic speakers. More importantly, his commentary is not burdened by the politicization of Islam that we are currently witnessing. Indeed, the grit and determination of Muhammad Asad continues to inspire us to this very day. And it is for this reason that we pay tribute to him as much as we can. The day before IRF was launched, in collaboration with Islamic Book Trust, we held an event in tribute to the legacy of Muhammad Asad, an event whereby Dr. Farouk, our chair, spoke alongside Professor Tariq Ramadan on Asad's important legacy. The event was also to launch the Islamic Book Trust republication of the message of the Quran, this time complete with an index. To commemorate this, an exhibition on the life of Muhammad Asad and a screening of A Road to Mecca, a film biography of his life, were also held. Today marks a continuation of our homage to Asad. Indeed, it marks a continuation of his story, but for the Malaysian context. Asad remains a profound example for his reminder of the nature of struggling for Islam and the sacrifice and patience it demands. He remains an important inspiration for us to continue to persevere. But more importantly, above all else, IRF's journey would not have gotten this far without you, without the support and trust from our friends who stood with us at the best of times, the worst of times, the most daunting of days, the most challenging of weeks. So thank you very much for joining us today. We shall continue our reflection on Asad's legacy with Professor Farouk, who shall share with us some of his thoughts on Muhammad Asad's ideas. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Farouk.
deans, professors, fellow commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Allow me to take you, all of you, down memory lane so that effort in translating and presenting Muhammad Asad's The Message of the Quran is well appreciated. Let me start by saying that my quest to read and understand the message in the Quran as it was supposed to be read and understood has been a lifelong journey. I started reading the Quran systematically at the age of 13. At that time, more because it has been a ritual for me and many of my friends who frequented the local mosque in Kelawai, Penang. Completing the entire Quran during Ramadan was a must, and we were competing among each other to ensure that we will complete the task before the new moon of Shawwal was sighted. I was 15 when the entire country was swept with the euphoria of the Islamic Revolution of Iran. The rejuvenated spirit at that time was so immense that not even the recent Arab Spring is comparable to how the revolution waves hit and transformed many young hearts at that time. It was during that time that even the Islamic Party passed. Young vibrants disposed of the existing leader and emulated the Iranian-style Wilayatul Faqih, or what is known as kepimpinan ulama. The eagerness and to understand the words of God was so intense that at that time that I ended up buying an Indonesian translation of the Quran by Professor Hasbi Asidiri. It was the first Quran with translation that I read for the years to come and keep until today. What stimulated me to read the Quran intently, to understand the underlying message, was none other than the experience I had at Yayasan Musriyah in book01.mov when I followed the tamrin organized by the Islamic Youth Movement of Malaysia, or known as ABIN. During the tamrin, I was exposed to a very influential Islamic movement in the Middle East, Egypt in particular, that is Al-Ikhwan Al-Muslimun, the Muslim Brotherhood. It was during this time when I was exposed to the thoughts and methodology of Dawah or Al-Imam Shaykh Hasan al-Banna. It was then when I first learned about Ma'alim fi Tariq, or the milestones, by Shaykh Sayyid Qutb. On the first chapter of Ma'alim fi Tariq, Sayyid Qutb discussed about the Quranic generation. It was the generation of the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet. The entire premise of milestones lies on the basic tenet of educating and motivating the potential vanguard of the re-Islamization movement. The book was written in order to reorient the Muslim minds in such a way that it could inspire the masses with a transformative revolutionary consciousness as inspired by the Quran. First and foremost was the clear spring from which the first generation of Muslims quenched their thirst. The spring from which the companions of the Prophet drank was only the Quran, and only the Quran, as the hadith of the Prophet were only offspring of this fountainhead. The Quran was the only mold in which they formed their lives. It was according to the well thought of plan to prepare a generation pure in heart, pure in mind, and pure in understanding. Their training was to be based on the method prescribed by God, who gave the Quran, purified from the influence of all other sources. The method described by Sayyid Qutb in creating the Quranic generation was similar to the method of the first generation. They read only a few verses, probably 10 at most, and then they reflected upon those verses and transformed their beliefs, understanding and actions according to those verses. About the same time, I read Tafsir Surah Al-Fatiha by Shaykh Hasan al-Banna, where he strongly encouraged every Muslim to read and try to understand the Quran using God's given faculty. He recalled the verse, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. And as for those who strive hard in our cause, we shall most certainly guide them onto path that leads to us. Al-Ankabut 29 verse 69. It was then that I made it compulsory upon myself to consistently read the Quran every day after Maghrib prayer, at least an ayin, or approximately 10 verses, and contemplate upon the meaning. I still remember after 2 years of my persistent effort, at the age of 19, I managed to complete the entire Quran and the meaning finally on one cold winter night. On that night, I paused and recollected the important themes of the Quran. Among the most important message they understood was the human nature of the Prophet. He has no supernatural power and definitely not a supernatural being. Surprisingly, this important concept was never emphasized before in my life. In Surah Al-Kahfi verse 110, God says, "Say, O Prophet, I am but a mortal man like you. قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ يُوحَى إِلَيَّ أَنَّمَا إِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ." I am but a mortal man like all of you. It has been revealed unto me that your God is the one and only God. Surah Al-Kahfi verse 110. This understanding would later turn out to be the most important premise in the evolution of my thought process in the future. My next task was to read a more detailed explanation of the text. That was when I got acquainted with two most important tafsir at that time. In Malay, Tafsir An-Nur by Professor Hasbi As-Siddiqui and Tafsir Al-Azhar by Professor Hamka. Coincidentally, just like Hassan al-Banna, Hasbi As-Siddiqui and Hamka were both students of the greatest reformer of the 20th century, Al-Imam Al-Ustaz Al-Imam Muhammad Abdul. Reading the tafsir was accompanied by reading dozens of books on the sciences of hadith and fiqh, mainly by students of the reformist school of Muhammad Abdul, like A. Hassan, Munawar Khalil, Isa Ansari, and Hasbi As-Siddiqui, just to name a few.